Yo, what's up? I'm KallaTheYapper, and I'm back with another reaction, bruh. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to this video made by the Nigerian Perspective. This was 2 days ago, as of checking his channel. Someone sent this to me in the Discord. I'm going to say this right now. I watched up until like almost the halfway point of this video. And then I was like, you know what? I got some words to say about this, about his take. Because the thumbnail of this video is a story at war with itself. That's the title of this video. Well, the thumbnail title of this video. Which, one, I hope he proves his claim that's stated in his thumbnail, that the story is at war with itself. I would love to know what exactly he means by this. Because Genshin Impact story has been following its path verbatim ever since they released the teaser trailer. We've been going to each and every region, right? All the way up until this point in the game, with the only detour being Nodcry, but Nodcry, as the dev stated, and also put into the lore of the game, Nodcry like borders on Snezhnaya, technically, right? So it's our stepping point, our little, quick little mini stop before we go to Snezhnaya, right? But other than that, we've been following the plot all the way through, verbatim. I don't know what it is about Genshin's story that did not, that's at war with itself. Not too sure what he means by that, but hopefully he explains that in depth and in great detail in this video, and he doesn't half-ass it and give like vague ass answers. That's just me personally. Because again, if you're gonna make statements like that, you need to be in depth. You can't do this half-ass shit. Anyway, let's get into the reaction, shall we?
See, about a week ago, Genshin Impact released the Luna 3 story, the latest chapter in the Nordcry arc, a story that pushes us further into uncovering the secrets of the Nordcry region and even touches in subtle ways on the Traveler's larger narrative. And honestly, for a lot of reasons, this story really stood out to me. There were several moments I genuinely enjoyed, moments that felt intriguing. It wasn't just about engaging on the surface, it gave me that feeling that there was more beneath it, more being set up. Now initially, I wanted to make a video purely...
I would argue that's kind of been happening throughout the entire game. Dainsleif quests that tied to the Traveler's personal character and their relationship with their sibling did a lot of, fleshing that out. I don't know why it feels like only Nodcry is doing that. Granted, maybe I'm misunderstanding his words, but that's what it sounds like to me. That he is making the claim that only Nodcry is giving this feeling. Maybe only this part of the story is giving this feeling. Who knows? I could be wrong, because they were kind of doing that at the start of the Lunar 1 story. Technically. But anyway, let's get back into it.
The surface. It gave me that feeling that there was more beneath it, more being set up. Now initially, I wanted to make a video purely dissecting the Luna 3 story itself. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about one chapter. This was about Nordcry as a whole. At this point, we've experienced 3 separate stories within the region. We've spent enough time here, we've met enough characters, we've gone deep enough into the narrative to finally step back and ask a bigger question. What do I actually think about the Nordcry experience overall? Has Genshin Impact done a good job with this region, with how we stood?
Yes. Blatantly. Anyone try to argue otherwise, you're purposely being obtuse to say Genshin bad. I'm gonna say that right now before we even get into it. So before anybody even comes with something, no, it is bad, shut the fuck up, because you can't even give me a good example, give me good proof of it being bad. Oh my goodness, I just realized, I just remembered, it was a while ago, I believe. I think it was the Lunar 1 story. I remember I made a community post and someone was having a back and forth response with me in my community post about why the Lunar 1 story, or like there was something bad about it. And I provided pushback and they couldn't really give me a solid answer. It was just like basically, oh, it's bad because I just feel that way, versus any bad writing that was happening.
Do I actually think about the Nordcry experience overall? Has Genshin Impact done a good job with this region, with how its stories are structured, how they're presented, and how engaging they truly are?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Or are there underlying issues that became clearer when you look at Nordcry as a complete package?
I can't wait for him to get into depth about that, because I've got a lot of words to say.
That's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. So if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to like the video and let me know what you think.
So let me go ahead and skip, because he about to hit me with this whole, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about none of that. I'm trying to get into the actual video. All right, let's get it.
Thank you again, Audition, for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into it. So in order to really understand my thoughts on Notcry and how well or how poorly Genshin Impact is telling the story right now, we need to focus on two major things. So
wait, what?
And how well or how poorly Genshin Impact is telling the story right now, so in order to really understand my thoughts on Notcry and how well or how poorly Genshin Impact is telling the story.
Okay, he's saying how well or how poor Genshin is telling the story right now. Okay, my bad. He kind of like mashed his words together.
Right now, we need to focus on two major things, so more specifically, two major groups of character. The first group is the Traveler and Paimon. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that I've always had issues with how these two characters are handled. I've consistently had problems with how Genshin integrates them into the story, with their dynamics with each other, and with how that dynamic extends to the rest of the cast.
And what exactly are those problems? Would you please elaborate on that first before like going into depth about the two major problems? Because I'll express my problem that I had with the Traveler and Paimon dynamic. It wasn't even the dynamic itself. It was the fact that it felt like a one-sided dynamic because of the fact that Paimon felt like she was the only one talking. Because every piece of dialogue she has was voiced. Whereas the Traveler rarely had voiced dialogue for years, right? It was in my opinion, it was the dumbest decision made by the Genshin writing team to be like, let's have our main character not talk at all. Despite the fact we wrote their own personal lore, gave them a name, and so on, even gave them a voice actor to voice the character. It doesn't make, to me, it never made sense for all these years for the Traveler not to speak. Or rather, to speak so rarely. It always pissed me off, personally. So when I saw Withering Waves, after like the first couple stories from the early version patches into version 2 stories, right? I was like, I like the fact that their main character is speaking more. They're not silent most of the time. Granted, they've been flip-flopping on letting them speak versus letting them be silent. Instead, honestly, they should just let them speak all the way through. Like, you know, Xenozone Zero's main character who gets to talk all the way through. They get to yap their head off and get treated like a character, which, of course, Genshin and Wuwa's character gets treated like a character, right? But what I mean by this is that they don't get shackled because of, certain dumb decisions for the writing team to be like, we have to keep them silent because, you know, silent protagonists self-insert bullshit. It's like, no, shut all that stuff up. Shut it up. I want these niggas to speak. And I love the fact that the Zenless main characters can speak. I love it. I even love their dynamic. I even love the differences between the two. Like when, for example, the 1.4 story, right? When Bell and Wise are trying to turn off the system while the PubSec is entering into the room, both characters react differently to it. After they get saved by, you know, Zhu Yuan and Qing Yi, and when they sit down in their chair, Belle is shaking her hand. Well, Belle's hand is shaking violently as she told him to cup trying to get a sip of it. Whereas Wise is extremely calm as he takes his sip. I love that difference between those two characters. Granted, the same thing applies for Genshin Impact as well, right? Granted, not with every scene, but with certain things. Oh, actually, that it is certain things. For example, the Traveler, pretty sure in the scene where the Traveler and Columbina are trying to exit the area while being chased by Rifthounds, the Traveler slams down into the ground and causes a geo spike, whereas Lumine stomps her foot into the ground to cause a geo spike. Right? It's like subtle differences like that I really like. Anyway, hopefully you get the point I'm making about the Traveler, why I hated the fact that they didn't speak for large amount of time in relation to their dynamic with Paimon.
Is them into the story with their dynamics with each other and with how that dynamic extends to the rest of the cast. So the question we need to ask is this: has there been a noticeable shift in how Genshin Impact portrays this duo, especially the Travelers themselves? Is there anything different, more engaging about how these?
Yeah, the most engaging thing, the quick answer to this question is the Traveler is speaking more. Their voice lines are more audible. We get to hear the voice line be voiced acted. That's what's making Paimon and Aethers, or the Travelers, dynamic more, you know, enjoyable to engage with.
how these characters are written now compared to previous regions. That's the lens we're going to use as we move forward. The second group of characters we need to talk about is really everyone else in Nordcry, or rather, specific characters that represent change in Nordcry. And this part of the discussion is especially interesting because right off the bat, there's been a noticeable shift here. Something about Nordcry feels different, and I think Genshin is using its characters and the factions they belong to as vehicles to represent that change within the story.
Obviously, yes, because if you take a look at Natlan was driven by its plot and not its characters. Whereas Fontaine and Sumeru was driven by what? Their characters, not the plot. Nordcry is doing what? Nordcry is driven by what? The plot or the characters? Oh, it's the characters. So they've gone back to the popular formula that they did when it came down to Sumeru and Fontaine, but dropped the ball when it came down to Natlan. And they've gone back to they picked that ball back up and they're rolling it now. That's what's happened.
Genshin is using its characters and the factions they belong to as vehicles to represent that change within the story. Now, whether those changes are actually good or bad is a separate question. That's something we're going to unpack as we go deeper into the conversation, but the intent is there. The way these characters are written, positioned, and used feels deliberate, and that alone makes them worth examining. So with that...
Like, yeah, of course it feels deliberate. Every character's writing feels deliberate on purpose. Like, did you think other characters that came before Nordcry didn't, and their character writing wasn't deliberate?
These characters are written, positioned, and used feels deliberate, and that alone makes them worth examining. So with that said, let's begin with Genshin Impact's portrayal of the Traveler and Paimon. Now, moving into Nordcry, as I've mentioned, there's been some noticeable changes, especially when it comes to the Traveler. The most obvious one is that the game has finally started to give the Traveler a sense of individuality. For the first time in a very long while, there's an actual separation between the Traveler and what has effectively been their mouthpiece for years, Paimon.
We've had multiple instances in the story before Nordcry of the Traveler being separated from Paimon. Now, was these moments in abundance? No, but when it happened, and it was notable. Case in point, the bedtime story Archon quest. Paimon, at a certain point in time in that quest, disappears, and it's only the Traveler there, having their conversation with their sibling. Before that, we had the Traveler experience past memories from 500 years ago that belonged to Lumine, and seeing the first the first member who created the Abyss Order being Clotar Alberich, and meeting his son and all that stuff. Paimon was not there for the majority of that quest. So we had about 2 instances I can recall where Paimon was not present. Oh, actually, another instance I can recall is Natlan. In the final act for Natlan, the 5th act, right, when we're going to fight the Abyss in the Night Kingdom, Paimon stays behind because she can't follow the Traveler and Malvika there because she does not have resistance against the Abyss. She has no way to fight against the Abyss as far as we know. So Paimon has to stay behind. The Traveler goes alone with Malvika. Another thing that worth noting is that the story, ever since Sumeru, they've been really hitting us with this idea that Paimon hates the idea of separation from the Traveler. She really hates it. Because if y'all remember, in the Sumeru Archon quest, I think it was Act 2, I believe, where we were stuck into some sorrow cycles in those dreams. There was at one point in the story where the Traveler decided to make this plan where the Traveler would go and try to explore outside the city in the dreamscape to see what they could discover. And then they would report back the information to Nahida and to Paimon when they came back after the dream resetted, right? Once we got back and regained our memories, thanks to Nahida, Paimon immediately has an emotional reaction and is like, Traveler, you were gone for so long. Where you went, twin? Right? She had a whole emotional breakdown over the fact that the Traveler was gone for so long. Right? Then we had another moment like that we had another moment, not exactly like that, but a moment that, how can I phrase this? Leaned more onto the idea that Paimon doesn't like being separated from the Traveler. This was in the Dainsleif arc on Quest, where the traveler experiences their sibling's memory from 500 years ago. I believe it was before we actually go into that dream, thanks to the ley line disorder, right? Paimon and the traveler have a full-blown conversation, right? The traveler is telling Paimon about how they used to travel from world to world and how they would look up to the stars and select what planet they would go to and then basically travel like that, right? They'll map out their travel like that, right? Paimon asks the traveler a serious question of, hey, do you find it annoying that I'm hanging around you? Or something along them lines, right? Because she feels insecure with her relationship with the traveler, because she knows that once the traveler reunites with her sibling and they finally leave this planet, Paimon, she knows that she's going to be alone. She's not going to have the traveler anymore. She's going to be in this world by herself without her friend. Her number one friend, mind you. Now, we've made friends all across Teyvat at this point in the story, right? So technically, Paimon has a lot more friends, but her number one A1 day one friend is the traveler. So with that interaction we had, it leans even more so onto the idea that Paimon doesn't like the idea of being separated from the traveler, and that she in the future will have to accept that reality when the day comes for them to depart from each other. There was even a scene where at the end of that Dainsleif quest in Sumeru, where the traveler wakes up from the ley line disorder dream that they experienced, unburies those bodies or whatever, and the traveler gives Paimon a hug. Cause like, yo, I've been gone for I miss you, twin. Yo, come get this hug for real. It was a first person view from Paimon's point of view of being hugged by the traveler, further cementing to us their relationship with each other and how much both of them care for each other and how much both of them value each other's company and companionship. It was really beautiful in my opinion. Anyway, let us continue.
But there's an actual separation between the traveler and what has effectively been their mouthpiece for years, Paimon. And that separation comes in something very simple: more dialogue. In Nordcry, the traveler is more vocal, more proactive within.
More dialogue? I don't agree with this more dialogue part. The traveler has always had dialogue. They've always had dialogue. The problem is that the dialogue wasn't voice acted. So it felt like the traveler had less dialogue, when in reality it didn't have less dialogue. They had a good amount. It wasn't voice acted. Another thing he mentions, hold up, let me go ahead.
Comes in something very simple: more dialogue. In Nordcry, the traveler is more vocal.
Vocal, that's true.
More proactive within.
More proactive. Has the traveler not been proactive throughout the entire story up to this moment? Or do you think the traveler has just been sitting around on the ass all the time? What type of nonsense is this? This claim that the traveler has now been more proactive, as if they have not been proactive throughout the story. Case in point, the traveler was proactive in, trying to prove that Lenny was innocent and did not kill his assistant for his magic trick. Was not the traveler being proactive? What about in Sumeru? Do you think the traveler was not being proactive in trying to save Dunyarzad from dying in the samsara dream cycle stuff that was draining her of her energy, and her illness on top of that was stacking on top of that, which will end up resulting in her death? You don't think the traveler was being more proactive, knowing that someone's life was on the line? What about in Inazuma? You don't think the traveler, after being convinced by Ayaka, you don't think they were being more proactive and being like, oh, Toma's about to get his vision taken. I got to stop that. I got to help him. I got to save him. Oh, now I'm on the run from the Shogunate. I need to join the resistance and help them, bring back their visions and their freedom and their ambitions. I got to help them with that. In Leeway, what were they being proactive with in Leeway? In Leeway, they were pretty proactive in getting the all the Adepti together after they went there to get a sigil of permission. Right? They went from Adepti to Adepti, and then all of them gathered together. Then they were like, yo, we gonna have to make our move because we don't like what the Chi Sing is doing, so on and so forth. The traveler was proactive in Mondstadt when it came down to helping stop Dvalin by, attacking him when he attacked Hamasai with tornadoes. Then after the fact, helping the Knights of Favonius try to depower Dvalin. In Natlan, the Traveler was proactive in the story by going to help save Kachina. They were also proactive in the story, helping, Lali try to find out what the heck Ororon and the captain are up to. And on top of that, the Traveler was proactive in the story, being like, yo, I gotta go help people on the battlefield fight against the Abyss. Let me get on this air blimp. Let me run to this next fighting area, to the next battlefield. Oh, the messengers have all died. I need to start sending out these messages myself. Now, I gotta take the information and go send it to them quick as possible. Pronto. I need to go help evacuate people from their tribe to the city or to the stadium so they can have a safe stronghold, so on, so forth. You get the point I'm making?
Within the story. Now, contrary to what a lot of people believe, I don't see this as a massive win. This isn't some huge W. This is something the story should have been doing a long time ago. We should have always had clearer access to the Traveler's thoughts and emotions.
We should have... Oh, wait a minute. Did y'all just hear that? We should have always had clear access to the Traveler's thoughts and emotions. My guy, we've been playing this story for 5 years now. You're telling me, from your own words, that we have not had access to the Traveler's thoughts and emotions for all these years? We have a whole scene. We have scenes where the Traveler is making the thinking pose, and he has a whole dialogue box of us reading his thoughts of what he's thinking. And his thoughts don't even reflect what Paimon is thinking, because Paimon looks at the Traveler and be like, oh, bro, what you thinking about? And then the Traveler responds in kind, and she's like, oh, okay. And we move on. Or sometimes the Traveler won't even tell Paimon and just tell her, yo, follow me. And she'd be like, okay. Like, what? When the Traveler is having his personal thoughts, thinking about what happened with Deirdith back in the 5.7 story? Or what about their personal thoughts they have about Lumine? Their personal thoughts that they have about Dainsleif? Like, what? It's like, or their personal thoughts about when it came down to Farina or Nahida or even Columbina currently now. It's like, why are we saying that why are we making the claim that the Traveler never had their thoughts and opinions on display for us to see, nor that we had access to it? A quick little Google search to any cutscene, that's not even a cutscene, a dialogue scene or a moment in dialogue with another character that the Traveler has had will say otherwise to what he's claiming right here.
This is something the story should have been doing a long time ago. We should have always had clearer access to the Traveler's thoughts and emotions, instead of constantly having to infer everything through what Paimon is thinking or feeling.
This is objectively a lie. We have not... Oh. Give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. Had to take a phone call. Anyway, back to the point. We have not needed to infer the Traveler's personal thoughts at all from Paimon through all these years. I don't know where he's getting this idea from, and what's even worse, he's not providing proof of this claim that he's making. He's just saying it with no proof. The true proof of the matter is the Traveler has always expressed their own personal thoughts. The only thing is that since the Traveler did not have their voice lines voice acted for us to hear said thoughts, despite the fact we can see them, it came off as Paimon's thoughts, but it wasn't, because the Traveler's name was literally put on the dialogue box to show it to us. So, one, he's wrong about this take entirely.
traveler's thoughts and emotions instead of constantly having to infer everything through what Paimon is thinking or feeling. The traveler is the protagonist, yet for years, their inner voice has been filtered through someone else. That said, getting this change in Nordcry is still better than...
Again, just hearing him make this claim with no proof and not providing the proof is crazy. I guess his proof is this scene right here. Hold up.
Infer everything through what Paimon is thinking.
I guess his proof of us having to infer what the traveler is thinking through Paimon is this scene right here, where the traveler is just looking at Paimon when she's talking. Despite the fact, in the same scene, the traveler is also having conversation back and forth with, Columbina. And it's not just, the traveler is talking to Columbina while the traveler just stands there just looking.
Thinking or feeling. The traveler is the protagonist, yet for years, their inner voice has been filtered through someone else. That said, getting this change in Nordcry is still better than never. It is late, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
It was never late. It was always here since day one, A1. It's like, bro, this claim is objectively a lie. Now, he may not realize this is a lie because he's so caught up in, Genshin doing everything bad and everything wrong, right? But again, this is objectively a lie. Genshin Impact has always expressed the traveler's thoughts and opinions, along with Paimon's thoughts and opinions. Guess what? Between the two characters, who gives people ugly nicknames? Is it the traveler or Paimon? Or is it both of them? Oh, the answer is Paimon. How can we say that we have to infer what the traveler is thinking via Paimon when, one, the traveler has their own thoughts and opinions and it's expressed on screen for us to read? I guess reading is, a lackluster skill around these parts amongst the gacha space. But also, the Paimon has expressed multiple times of giving people ugly nicknames and being called emergency food by the traveler. The Paimon gave Venti the nickname of Tone Deaf Bard, not the traveler. Paimon gave Ito the nickname Bull Chucker, not traveler. Like, come on now.
And really, what a mighty step it is. Because watching the traveler move through Nordcry made me...
Wait a minute. He just said earlier that this is not a mighty step for Genshin Impact. This is something they should have done years ago. But now, he's saying that what a mighty step it is. It's either one or the other, bro.
The right direction. And really, what a mighty step it is. Because watching the traveler move through Nordcry made me realize something very important. I've been playing Genshin Impact under a misconception about the traveler for a very long time. See, because Paimon has effectively acted as the traveler's mouthpiece for years, and because Paimon herself is often portrayed as immature, impulsive, and extremely thoughtless, I had subconsciously assumed that those traits reflected the traveler as well.
When I got to this point in the video and he said this, I couldn't believe that, because I'm not gonna lie, this is the biggest sign of lacking of reading comprehension someone can ever admit. You're telling me for 5 years straight, up to this point of now, with the most recent story for Lunar 3, that you did not see any evidence to suggest that the traveler and Paimon have their own thoughts and opinions about things. Even in their dialogue boxes that they have, both in the midst of the story and in their personal voice lines that you can just go to the travelers, voice lines and listen to them having a back and forth conversation with each other about different topics, from nations to gods to food and so on. It's like, you're really telling me that you couldn't tell that the traveler and Paimon had two different thought processes and opinions to give? And you always thought Paimon was expressing the traveler's opinions? When it's like, no, when that was never the case. Like, bro, what? It doesn't take a reading genius to put that together when it was blatantly in our faces for 5 years straight.
Impulsive and extremely thoughtless. I had subconsciously assumed that those traits reflected the traveler as well. Genshin positioned them so closely together that it was very easy to believe they shared the same mindset.
No. It is not easy to believe that they share the same mindset. Just because they agree on a lot of things on what to do and to help people. And when it comes down to like being an adventurer as well, they're like, oh, are we getting paid for this commission? The traveler and Paimon both express that. Because like, yeah, duh, if I'm doing this job, I should get paid for the commission. No, we need the more money to live. We need the money to eat. Naturally, they're going to agree on that. The traveler isn't this ultra good-hearted person that's going to just do things for free 24/7. Certain things they will, because some things are just above the money. But other things were like, oh, you asked me to do this commission? Don't worry, I got you. I'll help you. But of course, I need to be paid and compensated for the commission, right? They're going to act like that because they're not this ultra pure-hearted, good individual 24/7. They have their needs too. They have their wants too. They're just as sinful as any other person. Like, shoot, here's a detail between the Traveler and Paimon that's completely different. Guess what? Paimon stashes a secret amount of Mora in her shoe. She don't stuff it in her scarf. She don't stuff it in a pocket that she keeps on her person. She puts it in her shoe. This was mentioned literally on screen like a couple patches ago, probably 2 years ago. I remember this interaction where Paimon was like, man, I got to pull out from my personal savings. Now, someone who knows exactly what that scene came from, let me know in the comment section. But I do remember that. And that was a big distinction between Traveler and Paimon. Off rip.
Traveler as well. Genshin positioned them so closely together that it was very easy to believe they shared the same mindset, but Notcry challenges that assumption completely. Through the Traveler's own words,
not just Notcry, but the entire story can challenge that opinion and slap it to the floor. You legitimately just have to go back to the first early scenes of the game of the Traveler and the Paimon's dialogue, and you will see it firsthand. Notcry doesn't need to challenge anything, because Notcry is just doing what every other chapter of the story has been doing when it comes down to the Traveler and Paimon and them, engaging in conversation or expressing their opinions about things. They've just been doing the same thing they've always done. It doesn't need to challenge anything. The first chapter can challenge it alone. Go back to play that prologue right now. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Easy to believe they share the same mindset, but Notcry challenges that assumption completely. Through the Traveler's own words, you start to notice something that was always there but never really allowed to surface: depth. There's a staggering difference between the way the
something there, but that was never allowed to be expressed. Depth. Are those Dainslift quests we had prior to Notcry not exploring the depth of the Traveler's character and their relationship with their sibling and their relationship with Dainslift and the whole thing of the Conrad Cataclysm from 500 years ago? Did we not get those, apparently?
way the Traveler thinks and speaks versus how Paimon reacts to the world. The Traveler carries a level of awareness and maturity that you simply couldn't grasp when they were treated as mostly a silence protagonist.
No. This is false. The only way you miss that from previous regions we've been to is that you have to have been skipping the Traveler's dialogue boxes en masse to not realize the Traveler has their own personality. This conversation about the Traveler having whether or not the Traveler has their own personality and own thoughts and opinions happened years ago. Like 2 to 3 to 4 years ago, we were having this conversation. This is not a new conversation. This is something people have been had. And guess what? Most people came to the conclusion, people with any common sense in them, came to the conclusion that the Traveler, both Aether and Lumine, have their difference in preference when it comes down to food, how they engage in combat, and so on. So it was easy to tell that these characters clearly have characters to themselves, and these characters are not self-insert characters. They are full-blown characters with their own lore, their own depth, their own personality, their own thought process, and so on. It was clear as day to see since day one. The only issue was the fact that the Traveler was not voice acted enough or at all, which would help express the personality of the Traveler even more so than what the dialogue boxes could do. So for the longest time, we got a lot of Paimon's personality expressed in great mass by her voice acting. But we didn't get that from the Traveler, despite the fact the Traveler had a voice actor. That's what really happened. There's no way someone can tell me that, oh, for the longest time, the Traveler's personality has not been expressed at all. It's been expressed, it just didn't get expressed in the same way as Paimon.
The Traveler carries a level of awareness and maturity that you simply couldn't grasp when they were treated as mostly a silence protagonist. And that maturity becomes a...
Shoot, even the most recent quest I remember, I don't know if this is from the Luna story or from a story prior to it, but like, Traveler has these moments where he's making fun of Paimon, and Paimon reacts to it being like, bro, why are you making fun of me? Like, boy, what's that supposed to mean? And all that stuff, right? We have moments like that in the story prior to Notcry. And it's like, did we suddenly miss that? How do we miss this?
especially clear in the travelers' interaction.
I know how we missed this is because people weren't paying attention to the actual story or anything related to the story at all because they just wanted to skip button just to click, just skip all of it because they didn't feel like doing it. Which, again, I advocate for the skip button so that when people skip the story, I can be able to tell if you did when you start yapping about the story, when you clearly have been missing things that you claim to have paid attention to. As shown in this video alone,
grasp when they were treated as mostly a silent protagonist. And that maturity becomes especially clear in the travelers' interactions, and it shines most clearly in their relationship with Columbina. See, more than gods, monsters, and explosions, the story of Nordcry, at least what we've experienced so far, is fundamentally a story about solitude and friendship. And that theme is told most clearly through Columbina's perspective. Columbina's story begins with divinity. She is a god, revered and worshipped for as long as she could remember. But the story makes an important distinction. Worship is not companionship. Being surrounded by followers does not mean you are understood. And that is the solitude at the heart of her character. Later, when she stepped into a role where camaraderie seemed possible, as a Fatui Harbinger, you'd expect the isolation to finally break, but it doesn't. Even there, she remains fundamentally alone. Now, yes, she forms a kind of twisted bond with the damselette and Arlecchino, but that relationship...
Twisted bond? I don't know if I would call it a twisted bond. More so, it's a very unique relationship with Sandrone and Arlecchino. Her relationship with Sandrone is like, Columbina is like unintentionally a rage baiter, as we've seen. She can easily get under Sandrone's skin with little to no effort, as we saw with even the most recent Nordcry story. And it's been a thing that's been a part of their relationship. And it's clear today that Sandrone really holds their relationship to a high value, even though she doesn't want to admit that. Shoot, even when she found out that Columbina may have disappeared or whatever, she was like, well, I'm not going to invite her to my tea parties anymore, face of us. Arlecchino, they both can see eye to eye with each other when it comes down to Columbina and Arlecchino. Because there's the whole moon thing that ties them together. And they just naturally just get along with each other. They don't really have beef with each other. They respect each other's, companionship. And the little bit of friendship that they have with each other. Shoot, I was even arguing that it is friendship because when it came down to trying to save Columbina, Arlecchino came along and she was like, I'm here for my friend.
Relationship never becomes what she truly needs. What Columbina needed wasn't loyalty or shared ambition. She needed genuine friendship. People who could offer her real affection.
And I argue that Sandrone and Arlecchino did provide that. But, because they're in the business setting of being harbingers, right, and they don't really see each other that often, it doesn't feel like a friendship. Or it is not perceived as much of a friendship. But with the Nordcry story, it clearly shows to us that Arlecchino and Sandrone do view Columbina as their friend.
Columbina needed wasn't loyalty or shared ambition. She needed genuine friendship. People who could offer her real affection. And see, the most important thing about stories like this is delicacy. When you tell a story centered on solitude and the search for genuine connection, the expected conclusion is obvious. She finds companionship, she makes real friends. But if you want that conclusion to feel earned, if you want it to be believable and memorable, then the journey toward it has to carry the same weight. You can't just arrive there, you have to walk there. And in Genshin's case,
they succeeded, obviously. Here's a comparison I would like to bring. In comparison to Withering Waves, granted, it's not a direct comparison in terms of what the story was trying to tell us. But when it came down to Yuno was a character we had met in the previous story chapter, right? But we didn't even spend enough time with her to truly understand, or rather, not understand her character, but to flesh out her relationship with the rover. And then what happened in the 2.6 story? Or rather, the latter end of the 2.6 story, because I'm pretty sure 2.5 was for Lova. 2.6 was Yuno and Augusta, right? So in the first half with Augusta's story, the rover and Yuno, it starts like setting up their relationship. But like when it came down to the second half of the 2.6 story, it went full blown, Rover and Yuno, they've known each other for so long, this, that, and the third. And it was just like, no, we only just met her. We have not been around in the story. Their relationship has not been fleshed out enough to justify the Rover's emotional reaction to Yuno disappearing and fading from existence from the world. Because they have a whole montage scene of like different scenes that we had prior in the first half of the story for 2.6. But like even that was not enough to justify the story or how the story was trying to portray their relationship to us. You even have people be like, yo, Yuno deserved better, because they could have put forth the effort to, build up this relationship with Rover and Yuno, but they didn't. They actually dropped the ball and they just hop, skip, jumped it to the conclusion of, oh, they're real tight-knit friends with each other, despite the fact they don't really know that much about each other. And boom, now Rover is like, yo, I gotta go save her, right? It wasn't even good build-up. It was instant, like that. And mind you, all that happened in one patch. That whole plot I'm telling you right now, for those of you who didn't play Wuthering Waves or may have dropped it or whatever, all that happened in one patch. It didn't happen in 2 patches, because what Wuthering Waves started doing, they started doing this whole thing where they're breaking up story chapters, being like, oh, the first half of the story was available in like the first 2 weeks. You have to wait another 2 weeks before the latter half of the story is available for you to play, instead of letting you play it all in one go. The reason they're doing that is so that it can seem like the game has more content available to do when it really doesn't. Right? So, imagine if they decide to do Columbina's story and her relationship with the Traveler in one story patch, instead of letting it stretch on for 6.0, 6.1, 6.2. That's 3 story patches worth of content. Could you imagine Columbina's entire relationship and the Traveler being done in one story patch? And then just like, oh, we're just moving on. Right? Does that not sound bad to you? That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Because it is.
That journey was believable, it was memorable, and the single biggest reason for that is the relationship between the Traveler and Columbina. Throughout the story, there are multiple moments where we're allowed to see the Traveler's individual thoughts on Columbina's situation, moments where the Traveler openly expresses those thoughts, not filtered through.
Shoot, and even more so, you can go speak to Columbina in her little cave a lot. I did not do this a lot before, what happened in the 6.2 story, so I have to wait till she comes back or when we save her or whatever to be able to have those interactions.
Your thoughts on Columbina's situation. Moments where the Traveler openly expresses those thoughts, not filtered through Paimon, spoken directly to those around them, and more importantly, to Columbina herself. Now,
when has the Traveler ever had Paimon filter their relationship with another character through Paimon? When has that ever happened? Because the Traveler has expressed their opinions and thoughts about other characters, even with Paimon being present. Case in point, Farina. Now I'm gonna say my position about the Farina story quest. I know a lot of people have this position that the Traveler and Paimon were bullying Farina at the beginning of her story quest. Personally, I don't see it as that. I think they were just being honest, expressing their opinion, and Farina jumped the gun to think that they were like dissing her and being rude and mean to her for the sake of it. So like, yeah, Farina just got done, doing her 500-year plan thing that she didn't know whether or not it was going to work or not because she wasn't filled in with the entire knowledge of the plan. And she now stepped down from her position of being Archon, and now she's just like living regular life right now. And she doesn't even know what to do with her life at that point in time when this happens in her story quest, right? I get all that, but I personally do not agree with the idea that Paimon and Traveler were being rude to her on purpose and just being dickheads for the sake of it. I don't agree with that. I've had back and forth with people in comment sections. I even talked about it here on my channel, on stream with one of the homies before. I still stand on my position about it though.
Filter through Paimon, spoken directly to those around them, and more importantly, to Columbina herself. Now, is the writing for this expression perfect? Absolutely not. There are still moments where it feels like there is more depth that could have been explored, but despite that...
Can you give an example?
Perfect. Absolutely not. There are still moments where it feels like there is more depth that could have been explored, but despite that, it never really pulled me out of the experience. I still found myself fully invested in the conclusion of the Luna 3 story. And to be honest, that genuinely surprised me because I'm not someone who usually enjoys party scenes in game. I find them completely meaningless. But yeah, I actually wanted to...
Oh, really? I wonder, did you feel that way about the 2.8 story when we got to the end of it, where there was a whole party scene? I wonder if you felt that same way. The reason I say this is because if I find out that you didn't feel that same way when it came down to Wuwa, but you feel this way when it comes down to Genshin, you already know where my thought process is going. Hypocrisy. But if he's standing on his position about that across any game he plays, especially these gacha games, okay, cool.
Because I'm not someone who usually enjoys party scenes in game. I find them completely meaningless. But
actually, I guess I'm gonna give my opinion about that. I disagree with this take entirely. No, it's not completely meaningless because it's done to flesh out character relationships and show characters having a good time with each other and being like laid back, lax, expressing their opinion, expressing themselves, being joyous. That's the point of those. Sometimes even done for a downtime so that, the stress is high right now. We need something to de-stress, to get us in the proper headspace, to be motivated for what's about to happen next. And that's happened a lot. Shoot, at the end of Sumeru's Archon Quest, what happened? We had a little party to be like, we're celebrating the fact that Nahida is now in her position as Archon. We're celebrating that the changes are happening to Sumeru's academia so that people can be allowed into it, regardless if they're from especially if they're from the desert. The changes to criteria about XYZ, the corruption getting changed, the Akashi system being dismantled. So it was meaningful to have that party at the end. Because even Nahida got to talk with the people who helped save her, even though she was speaking through the Traveler, right, in that moment. So that she can express her thanks to her devout worshippers, even if they weren't all of them weren't devout worshippers, right? For Natlan, people had a real issue with the fact that it's like we're having this war happen with the Abyss, but why are we having parties? Granted, even the in-story explanation kind of answers this question for why we're having these parties. Because one, the Traveler is immersing themselves in Natlan's culture, and he's being invited to go there by the new friends he's making in Natlan. And then on top of that, we had that little party right before the final fight because, it's to build morale, get people in the right headspace before the final fight, and congratulate the Traveler for being here helping us through our trials and tribulations against the Abyss, which the Traveler did contribute a lot.
Genuinely surprised me because I'm not someone who usually enjoys party scenes in game. I find them completely meaningless. But yeah, I actually wanted to hear what everyone else thought about Columbina. I genuinely understood the subtle attraction Columbina felt towards the Traveler, and more importantly, I found myself frustrated, not with the story itself, but with the realization that Genshin could have made this change to the Traveler much earlier. But as good as all of this is, there are still two major downsides I noticed when it comes to the Traveler's journey in Nordcry. The first one, and easily the biggest, is Paimon. And listen, I've already said this multiple times, but I will repeat myself. Nordcry does represent change. There is change in how the story is told, change in how characters are written and depicted. And whether you think those changes are good or bad is up for debate, but the important thing is that the change is noticeable. But the one thing that has not changed at all is Paimon. She is the single point of stagnation in the entire story, and God knows I already have one too many videos expressing my frustration with this character. I don't need to, and honestly, I don't want to waste more time going over it again, so I'll keep it simple. Paimon does not evolve. There is no change in this character. She is the same Paimon we have experienced all the way from Mondstadt. And this leads me to all but confirm that this is a character that is and will probably always be a character you either like or you hate. Now, the second down.
Okay, that's not really enough information, or rather enough depth on that part to express why it's a bad thing for Paimon to be here. Oh, she didn't change as a character. Well, maybe because she's not meant to change as a character, or maybe her time to change is not happening right now. But again, I did express earlier about this aspect of the Traveler's relationship with Paimon, and how, actually, that's the biggest change that's been happening, or being, nudged at within recent time over the last 3 years of Paimon being separated from the Traveler. It's been nudged at to us since Sumeru till now. Actually, that's not 3, that's 4 years at that point. Wait, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 6.0. Okay, no, it's 3 years. I was right. It's 3 years. Anyway, no, so I would disagree with this claim that there has been no change to Paimon at all, when they've been nudging that, you know, the Paimon has abandonment issues and doesn't like the idea of being separated from the Traveler. So I already disagree with that take entirely. That Paimon has no change to her.
Waste more time going over it again. So I'll keep it simple.
Personally, I'm gonna say this right now. I personally like Paimon. I have no hate for this character at all. I know the only reason most people have hate for Paimon has nothing to do with her personal character. It's entirely tied to her voice acting. Because if you ask most people why do they find Paimon annoying, it's mainly because of her voice acting. That's it. That's the core reason. And that's been the core reason for years. Now her voice actor has been changed, you know, due to most recent things. Right? She got a new voice actor. Her tone of how she speaks, not the tone, but the, I guess, the optic or like the notches of high pitch in her voice have essentially toned down, essentially. Right? So now her voice to a lot of people is more manageable to listen to. Me personally, I never had an issue with Paimon's voice acting, but I can understand why people didn't like the fact that her voice was high pitched for years on end, especially when you first start the game. Paimon has a really low bass sounding voice. That's still like this whole pipsqueak sounding voice, but it's like got more bass in it and it isn't high pitched.
Character. I don't need to, and honestly, I don't want to waste more time going over it again. So I'll keep it simple. Paimon does not evolve. There is no change in this character. She is the same Paimon we have experienced all the way from Monsters. And this leads me to all but confirm that this is a character that is and will probably always be a character you either like or you hate. Now, the second downside for the Traveler's presentation here is something a little meta, and that is the voice acting, specifically for the male Traveler, since that is the version I play. See, at first, I thought the issue was simply that we don't usually hear the Traveler speak, and I assumed that the more dialogue the character had, the more this problem would naturally fade away. But even after finishing the Luna 3 story, the issue is still there. Now, before I explain exactly what the problem is, I need to be very clear about one thing. I don't think this is a failure on the part of the voice actor, not at all. The issue is not performance, it is rather the voice direction. And this is evident in the fact that there are moments in the story where the performance is genuinely excellent. One standout example is the scene where the Traveler reassures Columbina that her name is actually Columbina, that she doesn't need to search or cling to whatever name came before. And the delivery was nothing short of phenomenal.
Columbina! Are you here? Columbina! That's the name you gave.
Is this really the point of negative? That's a negative for this story? Are we serious? Voice direction? No, that should not be the point. The point should be the fact that the Traveler wasn't allowed to speak for years on end, with only certain moments being allowed to speak. No one cares about the whole voice direction. This nigga's voice direction has been the same for years.
When we first met, and it's what I've called you ever since.
Columbina.
It's a fine name. I have many fond memories of Columbina, and so do all of your friends.
That said, there are still moments where the voice acting feels off, and it's more noticeable in scenes that clearly call for a calmer tone. There are situations where everything about the scene points towards restraint. The context of the conversation, the words the Traveler is choosing, even the character's facial expression and body language, all of it suggests a quieter, more grounded delivery. But more often than not,
can you provide an example of this? Because the Traveler, for most of their dialogue, is silent. You cannot sit here and show me a scene of the Traveler having good voice direction, as if they didn't have good voice direction all these years. I don't know how the hell you get that point of view, but you can't even show me. Where's the example showing me of their bad voice direction? Can you please provide it? I hope you provide it in the next couple of seconds.
The Traveler still speaks with an overly excitable tone, and in those moments, it just does not feel natural. It doesn't sound like how someone would normally respond in that situation or carry a serious conversation.
What's your favorite kind of food? You know the moon in the sky isn't real, don't you?
This tone sounds exactly how anyone else would sound. Excuse you? What? I'm trying to understand where's the tone not matching what's being said here. Hold up. He doesn't have an ultra serious expression on his face. He has a pretty calm face expression right now, facial expression. This is nothing too serious. He doesn't look like he's pissed off. Like, he asks, what's your favorite kind of food? He looks as calm as possible to be asking this question. He don't look upset. Just don't be fooled by the fact that these eyebrows are facing in this diagonal, this angle. Don't be fooled by that, because a lot of people have resting bitch face. I'm one of them. The eyebrows be angled like that and make you think that, oh, you have an angry face on. You don't. You just got resting bitch face. That's all. So I'm trying to understand, how is this not matching?
We should not carry a serious conversation.
What's your favorite kind of food?
This was a serious conversation though, and he was engaging in it in a pretty calm manner.
You know the moon in the sky isn't real, don't you?
I don't understand how that sounds excited. Like, I'm trying to get where exactly is the excited tone. He sounds pretty calm. He sounds like he's being direct with her. You know this moon in the sky is fake, right? Or isn't real, right? Don't you? Like, I'm trying to see, how is it that he sounds excited?
What does it mean to you?
That
was pretty calm. That was pretty subtle. Pretty low toned. Where again is the, oh, he sounds excited and not matching the tone that matches the scene? I'm trying to grasp it. Where is it?
The moon in the sky isn't real, don't you? What does it mean to you?
That said though, this is a relatively small issue, especially when you put it next to the Paimon problem. So with that,
He didn't even provide a good example to prove that the traveler sounds excited when he shouldn't be sounding excited when saying this line or saying these lines. That was a terrible example, my guy. You could have thought of the reason why you couldn't find a good example. I'm gonna explain to you why you couldn't find a good example. It's because, guess what? Zach Aguilar, the dude who voices the male traveler, this nigga has been voice acting for a long time. He knows how to execute a character's lines. Peep game. Anybody here watch Demon Slayer in English dub? Guess what? Zach Aguilar, aka the voice actor for Traveler, aka Aether, is the same dude who voice acts as Tanjiro. Like, bruh, this man knows how to have his voice direction be a certain type of way when it needs to be a certain type of way. He's not some newbie, fresh voice actor on the scene who can't match his voice acting to the scene.
Do you?
that said though, this is a relatively small issue, especially when you put it next to the Paimon problem. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the next group of characters and the kind of change they bring to the story, starting with
Then why did you deem these two things about Paimon and the Traveler's voice direction as two major problems? Did you not just mention those as two major problems earlier? Hold up, let's go back right here. Let's listen to that again.
That Genshin could have made this change to the Traveler much earlier. But as good as all of this is, there are still two major downsides I noticed when it comes to the Traveler's journey in Nordcry. The first one, and easily the biggest, is Paimon. And
see, he limited it as two major. You don't use these words lightly without saying this intentionally. He said major problems with Nordcry's story. Two major problems. But then we go down here, he deems it as, oh, it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme in comparison to the Paimon thing. Then why would you label them both as major deals then? When clearly only one of them was a major deal.
What's your favorite kind of food? You know the moon in the sky isn't real, don't you? What does it mean to you?
that said though, this is a relatively small issue, especially when you put it next to the Paimon problem. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the next group of characters and the kind of change they bring to the story, starting with Columbina. See, I've noticed that a lot of people have issues with this character. Some feel she's too boring for the story. Others take issue with how passive her role is for most of the arc, especially when you remember that she's a Harbinger, a group that, by definition, is supposed to be compelling and imposing. But I personally thoroughly enjoyed Columbina as a character.
Anyone making these claims clearly do not understand that a character needs to be the group of characters who are like that, who is part of this fierce group, needs to be diverse in personality. Because if every last one of them are fierce, guess what? Then everyone is bland then. Because if everyone's fierce, nobody is fierce. You got one character out of the entire group of Harbingers who stands out as being like, oh, she's mute, she's like to herself, she doesn't really engage with people like that, she's a little silent, right? What's another word I'm looking for? She's a little introverted. Like, she'll come here and there. She's passive. Like, that's her own unique trait in comparison to Sandrone, in comparison to Arlecchino, in comparison to Child, in comparison to the Doctor, in comparison to El Senora. God rest her soul. But anyway, you get the point I'm making. A group who are supposed to be the antagonists, not the villains, but the antagonists of the story, Granted, the Doctor is blatantly villainous, hands down. That nigga needs to get locked up and put in the dirt. Anyway, for a group of antagonist characters or an antagonistic force of characters, they all should be diverse in their own personalities. Not every last one of them should be sharing the exact same personality. I prefer this. Honestly, people want every character to be like, oh, bombastic, oh, extroverted. Not every character needs to be extroverted. Most characters in Genshin Impact are extroverted. We have the one character out of like dozens of others who are like, yo, I'm a little to myself, I'm a little passive. I like go with the wind of things. You know, if someone else is doing it, I mean, cool, they can do that. I'll either go follow them or I'll just stay here, right? It's unique in her own way.
By definition, is supposed to be compelling and imposing. But I personally thoroughly enjoyed Columbina as a character, if for nothing else, then for this one reason. Through Columbina...
There's other villain groups in anime that have like, they have their occasional lazy character who's like laid back, who's not taking everything too seriously, or they just keep to themselves or whatever, despite the fact there's a villainous fierce force. The only reason they're a fierce force is because their combat abilities is fierce. That's why they're fierce. Right? Now, we've seen the combat abilities of a good handful of Harbingers at this point. Columbina as well. But, like, it doesn't degrade her character, or she doesn't, degrade the group by existing.
Thoroughly enjoyed Columbina as a character, if for nothing else, then for this one reason. Through Columbina, Genshin Impact shows a clear improvement in one of its most fundamental weaknesses: subtext. See, it's no surprise that one of the most fundamental problems with Genshin Impact's writing has always been its lack of trust in the audience. The writers operate under the belief that a single idea needs to be repeated and simplified for the audience to fully understand it.
Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. The only reason that's the case is because people, when you remove Paimon from the story, people, for some weird reason, even you, earlier, as I pointed out earlier, I don't need to repeat my point about referring to you earlier, but gacha players have a lackluster reading comprehension, and it shows. That's the reason why Paimon exists. And so, if something is said and somebody misses it or don't truly understand it, Paimon, of course, occasionally, would repeat it in a more simpler tone, so that not only would you, the viewer, understand, but also, guess what, the player. Oh, no, wait, hold up. Not you, the player, my bad. You would understand it, of course, as the player, but also Paimon herself will understand it, because Paimon is a bit slow. Despite the fact she's had her moments of being, like, really smart to pick up on things, but majority of the time, she's really slow on the pickup. That's the reason they do that. Even in Wuwa, I started noticing Ambi repeat information. Not in abundance like Paimon has done, but like it's been something like sly and subtle that if you're not paying attention, you won't catch it. They'll repeat a line like, "Oh, aren't we supposed to go do that?" Despite the fact it was just told to us like 2 minutes ago to go do XYZ.
There is very little trust placed on inference. The story rarely lets a moment sit on its own, and context is almost never allowed to do the heavy lifting. Instead, the meaning is usually explained outright, even when the situation itself already communicates what is going on. This has been an issue for as long as Genshin has existed, and it hasn't completely disappeared even now. Even in Nordcry, there are still moments where the writing falls back into that same habit. But there has been a shift. There are parts of this story where Genshin finally allows the scene itself to carry meaning, where it relies less on direct explanation and more on what is happening in the moment. And I think the character that represents that change more than anyone else is Columbina. Now, as you can probably infer from the way I've talked about Columbina's story, there's a lot of depth tied to this character, but what's interesting is the way Genshin chooses to express this depth. See, for most of the story, Columbina exists within her own isolated space, an environment surrounded by flowers, and on the surface it is simple, but this is where the nuance comes in. The flowers around her change color based on her emotional state. When Columbina is tense or angry, the flowers turn red. When she feels weak or subdued, they fade into white. And yes, in many moments, Genshin does what it usually does best, pointing out things that are already happening on the screen, especially when those flowers change color in response to her mood. But there are also moments where the game doesn't point this out, moments where it steps back and gives the players room to notice and interpret what is happening on their own. There are scenes where during a conversation or right after one ends, the flower shifts color without any direct acknowledgement. And if you're
obviously, because at that point everyone already knows it, so there's no need to repeat information saying, "Oh, the colors have changed," or have a character repeat, "Oh, the colors have changed." Now, honestly, if Paimon was in this scene with the Traveler, more than likely, the Paimon would notice the colors changing and be like, "Hey, look," and then turn around. Or she'll be like, oh, the flowers have changed. Oh, the flowers have started blooming. Oh, the flowers have changed color. They turned blue. And then turn around and be like, oh, right? That's what we would expect.
Where during the conversation or right after one ends, the flower shifts color without any direct acknowledgement. And if you're paying attention, you are given the freedom to infer Columbina's state of mind purely from that visual change. And beyond the obvious fact that this represents a shift in how Genshin approaches the storytelling, I genuinely appreciated this on a personal level, because there were times when I didn't even notice the change in color until after the consequences had already been played out. Only then did it click that the story had been quietly hinting at what was coming. And that realization, understanding that the game had trusted me enough to catch it, was something I really enjoyed. It became something I actively looked out for throughout the entire quest.
I mean, that's good for you, honestly. That's great. But again, the majority of gacha players have a lackluster reading comprehension, and it shows. Especially when people are like, bro, I don't understand XYZ thing. Especially when they want to be like, oh, I don't understand this plot that happened in Genshin. Oh, let me just yap my head off about why it's bad, despite the fact I don't understand anything about it. Or when they do it to Star Rail, when they do that to Zenless. Or when they do that to Wuwa even as well. Guess what? The repeating of information sometimes is a necessity rather than, oh, it's just put in there for the sake of it.
Especially during my conversations with Columbina. The next character I want to talk about is Alice, and how through her, Genshin shows a noticeable shift in animation. See, for a long time, Genshin Impact has had an animation problem. You can look at the big cutscenes and call them absolute cinema, and you'd be right. But outside of those moments, with the animation we actually spend most of our times with, things have always felt flat. Character movements often come across as stiff. There's been very little range in how characters express themselves, no matter how important or interesting they're meant to be within the story. Most of the time, their personalities only come through in what they say, not in how they move or carry themselves. But all of that changed when Alice was finally introduced in Genshin Impact, and I'll say this definitively. Alice is the single most animated character the game has ever had, bar none.
True. The only character rivaling her is Yehoda right now.
The moment she appears, you can tell the developers wanted her introduction to leave a strong impression, and it's worked. Her movements are fluid in a way we just haven't seen before. Her clothes react naturally as she moves, swaying with the motion instead of feeling glued in place. There is a sense of confidence and flamboyance.
Wait. You don't think the character's clothing has moved at all when the characters are like standing right here? Bro, you can just look at the scene right now and you can see the wind blowing in the character's hair. Certain parts of their clothing is moving in the wind. Like, what? Where do you get this idea that the clothing don't move when they're like in these dialogue scenes right here and just remain stiff? What?
Naturally as she moves, swaying with the motion.
Legitly, you see Paimon's cape in the scene swaying. If her cape stood stiff as you claimed it to be when it comes down to other characters' clothing, with the exception of Alice, then her cape shouldn't be moving.
Instead of feeling glued in place. There is a sense of confidence and flamboyance.
You just saw Lumine's hair move as she walked up and stopped walking. You saw it move back and forth.
As she moves, swaying with the motion instead of feeling glued in place. There is a sense of confidence and flamboyance in how she carries herself, and it lines up perfectly with the version of Alice I've had in my head ever since we first heard her voice back in version 1. I mean, for God's sake, this is how Genshin Impact chose to introduce this character.
Seems I've managed to leave quite an indelible impression, even though you've never seen my face.
But even with all of this, there is a downside to the animation discussion in Northcry, and it's something I really cannot ignore. You see, this level of animation that we're seeing right now feels reserved for a very small group of characters. You can tell there's been an improvement across the board. Cinematics are better, character animation in general feels more polished than it used to. The way the story is visually presented has clearly evolved, but despite that, it is not every character that receives the same level of attention that Alice does, and that is the issue. This kind of fluidity and expressiveness should not be an exception, it should be the baseline for a game like Genshin Impact. This is the standard we should be operating at by now. I'll always appreciate good animation when I see it, but unlike the subtext discussion we had earlier, where Columbina is just one example of something that appears throughout the story, this level of animation depth exists only on very few characters, and honestly, that just sucks.
I get why you feel like it sucks. Personally, I don't really care. Right? Yehoda is a 4-star character. She's not a 5-star character. Yet, she's had the most amount of expressive scenes out of every character in the game. The second character that's underneath her, honestly, is what's her name? Dory, right? Dory, same thing. Ever since we got into Nightcry, she's been doing a lot of unique animations and expressions when we have our scenes with her. Who else? And then of course, top of that cream of the crop is Alice, obviously. Something I noticed when it came down to Durin when I first started his story quest yesterday. Durin did this thing where he opened his palms of his hands. Usually the characters will have their fingers lined up with each other, and it's like it's like aimed straight forward when they open their hands, right? With Durin, they made him stretch his fingers out to look into the palm of his hands. Like, why? That type of look. Actually, hold up. Can I show it? I think I'm already like almost 2 hours into this reaction, or an hour and 20 minutes into this reaction. I don't know if I can show it right now. Hold up. Let's see if I can do it real quick. Just really quickly. I want to show this. Give me a second. All right. Let's go to live. I'm gonna show this real quick, and then we go back into it. I did a 3-hour stream yesterday of Genshin Impact, playing the first part of Durin's story quest, and then I did the Hexarai buffs quest at the end of it, which also had good animations in it as well. Go check it out. It was really fun to watch. Where is it? Come on. Where is it? Oh, it's right here. It's around here. It was something I noticed off the rip, and it really was fun to see. Why did the nigga looking at me like that? He like, who you? You see how he looked at me?
Traveler in Paimon? I'm sorry. I hope I didn't scare you.
Oh, no, you didn't scare us. Just gave us a little surprise. Looks like you've gotten even more powerful now.
I don't know. It just feels like it's gotten harder to control.
You see that? You saw that? Usually they would have just kept the hands like that, right? And just kept it pushing. But they decided
it just feels like it's gotten
to have him stretch his hands out like this. I have never seen any other character in the game stretch their hands out like this. Someone can provide me a clip proving me wrong in the comment section below, and I'll go watch it. But as far as I've seen throughout the entire story, I have never seen a character in this animated dialogue scenes like these open their hands up like this. Because he's opened his hands up wider. It's not the usual how they usually do it. He opened it wider. It got more curling to it, right? This is something I noticed immediately. Anyway, let's get back into it.
Now, there are other characters that represent changes in Nordcry that are not nearly as positive. For example, I think Valka represents a surprising level of underwhelm when it comes to newly introduced characters, especially within Nordcry itself.
No, he didn't. I don't know where you got that idea from. That sounds like a subjective opinion being pushed as fact.
Not just in how it's presented, but in how Genshin Impact chose to write its impacts into the story. Arlecchino, on the other hand, highlights a different issue entirely, one rooted in the writing, more specifically, how Genshin Impact handles enemies turned allies. With her, it generally feels like there is a missing stretch of development, an entire arc we're supposed to experience, but never.
No. Nuh-uh. This is wrong. After playing Arlecchino's story quest, we get an idea and understanding of who Arlecchino is. Mind you, prior to meeting Arlecchino in the story, when it came out to Fontaine, we had no metric to judge whether or not she was a good guy or a villain. There has been constant talk about Fatui and whether or not they're actually villainous characters, when in reality, most of them aren't. And knowing that each Fatui Harbinger directs their sect of Fatui agents under them completely different from each other shows, aka the captain. The captain was the biggest showing of this. The captain had his Fatui agents that work under him help the people of Natlan defend against the Abyss. He could have been a real devious individual and said, nah, we're going to sit back here and watch from afar. We're going to let them niggas die. We're not going to sit here and help them. We're going to use this time to get our hands on the Gnosis. He could have easily done that if he was a true villainous character, but he's not. He's an antagonist. He's not a villain. Just like Arlecchino. Arlecchino is not a villain. She's an antagonist. Child, same way. He's not a villain. He's an antagonist. The Torre is the only one we can label as truly a villain. And throughout Arlecchino's story quest, we learn more about her and her personal relationships and with her children of the House of the Hearth, and with her personal relationship with her friend that she lost all those years ago that she killed with her own hand. Which, mind you, her killing her friend was not an act of malice or intentional. It was purely someone else causing that, which resulted in her ended up killing her friend, even though she didn't want to do such a thing. So there was no character arc we missed. Arlecchino's story quest exists. If you did not play her story quest and you're wondering why it is that Arlecchino decides to help the traveler save Columbina, and you're wondering where's the missing puzzle piece, go play that damn story quest.
Lies. With her, it generally feels like there's a missing stretch of development, an entire arc we're supposed to experience but never did. And the conclusion we're given, especially the level of familiarity and connection she now shares with the traveler, feels unearned because we never walked that path with her. But
we did walk that path with her. I'm surprised Homeboy is not mentioning her story quest as if we didn't play it or as if we did not get it. Her story quest was meant to help us understand who Arlecchino is as a person, and her relationship with the House of the Hearth, and her ties to it, and why she ended up changing how the House of the Hearth operates. Even showed us in her own personal story that she's more merciful than where her physical appearance leads us to believe. The children of the House of Hearth being like, yo, I don't want to be a Fatui Hep member. I don't want to live this life anymore. Guess what? She said, well, you're going to have to die. Granted, they took it as, oh, we have to physically die. And it's like, no. All she's going to do is use her power to kill your current self that knows about the House of the Hearth and its inner workings and all that. That's the only part of you that's going to die. But you will still get to live. You're going to go live your life just not remembering what, you were a part of prior to this. And we even have a moment where we run into a character, NPC character, that was part of the House of Hearth at one point. We run into them in Fontaine right before we go fight Lenny and Lynette and whatnot. And, that whole fight that goes down, right? We ran into the guy. Arlecchino notices him immediately. And he's like, oh, sorry, ma'am. And keeps pushing. The traveler's like, oh, do you know them? It's like, oh, yes, I know him. But that was a while ago, or something along those lines. Y'all know what I'm talking about. For those of you who actually played her story quest, despite the fact there was so much misinformation being spread about Arlecchino's story quest, people making the claim that the animated trailer teasers spoiled her entire story when no, it didn't.
But still, despite all of that, I still believe that the writing and animation are the two most important factors when it comes to the overall enjoyment of a story. And with everything Genshin Impact has delivered in Northcry, I think they've done a fairly good job improving both. Not perfectly, not without issues, but noticeably better than before. But what do you think? How do you feel about the Northcry story as a whole? Do you agree with me on Genshin Impact's writing and animation, or did you walk away with a completely different impression? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
Let's be real. Most of the people in the comment section are just going to be like, oh, the game was bad, the story was bad, blah, 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 blah. Let's be freaking for real. With the evidence you have cultivated, that's all they're going to say. They're not going to give any type of good heads up about, or any fair, genuine criticism. It's just going to be bullshit. Anyway. Anywho. Yeah. I said everything I need to say in this reaction. You already know my opinion, and so on. So, like, sub, turn on the notification bell, join my YouTube community Discord if you wish. Link is on my channel. Check out my yapping topics and my yapping reaction content. Both playlists for both videos are on the channel. Shoot, a playlist may appear right here on the screen for you, so you can go check out either or one of them. I stream right here on YouTube. I plan to stream all this week until Thursday. Oh, I should have said today is Sunday, December 28th, by the way. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about doing, so I can cover as many of the games as possible. I'm also going to play Star Rail this week, so I can be caught up with Star Rail story. And I will be playing WoWow 3.0 as well, probably on the latter end of the week. So, be here for when I play that. Anyway, this is KallaTheYapper signing out. Peace. Oh, also, I am so close to 700 subs. Really appreciate if you help me get there. Anyway, peace. Thank you. And goodbye.